Well, good evening and welcome to another podcast of the Lyman Boats Show. Here with the legend himself.
Is this episode 6?
This will be episode number 6.
Number
and,
6.
We're looking at production up vessel models until 1960, some 47 to 60.
Well, I think we're gonna. Yeah, we're into chapter 6 with episode 6. Well, we probably want to start out.
You had some stuff you wanted to talk about.
Well, the
right
heat
out.
wave. The heat wave.
The heat wave.
And the storms.
Well, this is the
The storms. The storms are they're starting to upset me.
and why are the storms? Wait. Like before we get to why the storms upset you, I give the little tidbit of information. The hottest July in recorded history, recorded since we've actually been keeping data, not only for the United States but for the rest of the world. World. I mean, we got fires in Greece. We got
Okay, now I might want to
burning.
debate that because I think in 1930, but we're not going to go in that right now. It's hotter than two peckered goat. Everybody knows that, all right? But the storms.
The storms.
And
we had a dandy of a storm.
And Wednesday night,
dandy of a storm come through here.
and it blew a
Two
piece.
storms.
Yeah,
actually came through
and
here.
blew a piece of my full cover off. The Lucky Lyman. That upset me. I mean, that upset me enough to send the Pope to confession.
The Pope. And now, so wait, explain to the listening audience what exactly happened.
The wind.
Well, we
The
know
70
the wind
mile an hour
happened,
wind. I'm tired of the storms.
but it basically ripped a piece of your canvas, your boat cover,
Well, one of the parts from the snaps
flying off.
into the drink,
Well, supposedly.
and we've been
Or
fishing for it for what, all day,
and
half the
yesterday.
day yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we'll find it tomorrow. We're going to fix it.
We're missing a piece of canvas. The
Missing a
storm
piece of
took a
canvas.
piece of canvas.
Yeah. But I tell you what,
And we're a squirrel. She would have this
Squirrel's
done
not
already.
here. But Jim Barron's Port Clinton Canvas. We might put a plug in for him tonight. A good friend of mine. We've already got another section made in case we don't find the original. So
Yeah, I think it's looking pretty.
no,
It's a needle in the haystack to find that.
We've
It's a
still got
needle in
two
the
spots to
haystack.
it. We'll find it. We'll find it. If we don't, we don't. But anyhow, we've mentioned before that we're East Harbor at Tibbles Marina, and Debbie and I have been here for 42 years, and we just want to mention tonight that the Tibbles family has hosted the Veterans Fishing and Fish Fry every year, first Thursday in August, I think for the last 15 or 20 years, give or take. And this coming Thursday, August 3rd, any of you veterans, current, past, that want to come out and join in for free fishing, free fish fry afterwards at Tibbles Marina. And this year, I'm going to bring up my Uncle Tony. He is 96, soon to be 97, and he is the last of the 4 Karachny brothers that all served together in World War II. And he'll be here for the fish, not the fishing. And he is a hoot, and he's sharp as a tack at 96. So, any of you veterans want to come on out next Thursday, the Tibbles family will be happy to feed you fish, and everybody is grateful for your service. And I might add that Andy, the narrator tonight, he's active duty U.S. Coast Guard. And Andy, I want to thank you for your service. And also my son and daughter-in-law are also active U.S. Coast Guard. So, I mean, with that, we're going to take off where we left off last week.
Well, you kind of brought something up, and you sent me a text because there's a question I had where there's this posing question about this Liberty ship, and you found the information because this goes kind of back to World War II. So I was reading it, and I think that so a Liberty ship was 440 feet, 441 feet long, depending on the model, give or take.
Yeah.
Roughly 57 feet across, 10,000 tons of cargo. Right.
Right.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of rivets.
Right.
The record Liberty ship came out of Richmond from. Interestingly enough, it was Kaiser Permanente Metals. I don't know if anyone's from the West Coast, but Kaiser Permanente is a hospital now. So I don't know if there's any transition there when they went from building ships to,
I don't know.
fixing people. 4 days, 15 hours, and 30 minutes.
Yeah. Now
4 days.
Now,
Andy,
I'm
unimaginable.
I'm thinking that keel
Keel laid
to splash.
To splash.
All right. That's not.
Oh no.
Fit and ready to sail.
Oh no.
But still,
according to the documentation, it was out the door.
I don't know. I have a hard time believing
Everything's
that.
installed. You got to put the motors, and you're not going to open the hole back up and put the motors in. Everything was in.
I don't know. I think it might have taken longer. Regardless, still record. The World War II production in this country will never ever be achieved again like it was with the Greatest Generation, in my humble opinion.
Well, and then the Greatest Generation had the baby boomer generation, which
Right.
And now we just
we
raised
can't-
interest rates again today or 2 days ago. So my house buying is looking a little more gray.
Interest rates.
Yeah.
You're worried about interest rates. We can't even find anybody to flip a hamburger.
Oh, let's not get into flipping hamburgers.
All right, let's get on with this.
Let's get on with this. Let's as we digress
I don't
too
know.
far down the path.
I know.
Slippery slope.
It's hot.
Pretty soon we're going to be
It's
talking
hot.
about Put in Bay and everything else.
We're not going to go to Put-in Bay. All right. So,
yes, we are. Next Saturday.
Yes, we are. Might put another plug in for Lieutenant Commander Andrew Quaid.
Quaint, yeah. If you find me on Put in Bay next Saturday, you pronounce my name right, I might buy you a drink. So.
Okay. And tradition is the wedding down party upon promotion. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Andy, I'm taking him and how many guys?
We'll see who shows up.
Yeah. And we're going over for wedding down party for his promotion to Lieutenant Commander Andy.
Potentially my last promotion.
Yeah.
Potentially the last one.
Hopefully he's going to retire and live the life of luxury. Okay. Where'd we leave off last weekend?
So
or last Thursday?
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
last Thursday. Last Thursday. So
Yeah.
we kind of finished off on the post-war production of the plant and getting things all ready to go, and then I think we were kind of talking about the volume they started being able to put out because they were adopting these wartime techniques.
The wartime mass production techniques, right?
And then some of the things to that nature is that Lyman did a very good job of sourcing stuff.
Well, that before we get into that, we mentioned the fact about the German and Italian immigrants and the families that would host different families to come in, and the plant was predominantly made up of German and Italians through the immigration and host family
And the one Irishman who didn't last very long.
well, I think that was the McLaughlin story we told last.
We did tell that story.
Yeah, I don't think we need to rehash that.
No.
Oh, that was interesting. But
It was interesting.
yeah, but so now we have, yeah, and the war depleted a lot of the skilled workforce. I mean, people go off the war, they either don't come back or they don't come back to the same job. So they were able to fill the void after the war and start their mass production technique the same way they did during the war with the outboards and limited number of inboards.
It's correct, but let's talk about a sourcing thing, because one of the things they did very well was they had the ability to source lumber and to choose lumber, right?
Well, correct. Yeah. I mean,
Like you could you could go down a local sawmill.
Well, correct. You could do that. And the mahogany, you're at the mercy of the supplier. But as far as white oak, which is native to Ohio, they were able to outsource that relatively close. And one of the family sawmills was it K&K? Cable. K&K lumber out of Plymouth. The Capel family had a sawmill outside of Plymouth, and I was with Lee Capel yesterday, who I've known for years. I met Lee and his younger brother Jeff probably 40 years ago down at Schrock's, and they still had the mill that their father and grandfather started. And I said, hey, would you guys cut me some white oak? I said, I can always use good white oak. He goes, yeah. I said, but I need straight grain heartwood. I need it in 8/4, and I need it in 5/4. These kind of lengths. And he goes, it's just what Lyman used to order back in the day when I was a kid, and my father would sell to the Lyman Boat Works. And he said those guys would come down from the plant, 2 of them, and they would look over the logs that we were going to cut for them, and they'd sign off on the log, and it was absolutely checked off, no knots, straight grain, heartwood, and they would deliver it to the plant, and they would stick it.
Now, didn't your friend used to go actually to the deliveries when he was younger?
Yeah, he would help deliver the lumber up there when he was a kid.
Yeah.
I think Lee is a year older than I am, and Jeff is probably 2-3 years younger. But Lee remembers when he was a kid going up there in the 50s and 60s and delivering the white oak. And when you deliver white oak for boat building, you can't have kiln drying lumber below the water line. So the lumber's delivered green, and you have to stick it and air dry it, and that's quite a process in its own. I know when they used to bring mine down, I'd have everything set up. I'd have 4x4s down, probably every 2 feet, and I think the longest I ever ordered was 14 foot for the 5/4 for the rub rails for the 30, but most of the stuff was 10, 12 foot, the 8/4, and we would lay it out, and you lay it down on 4x4s on the ground, stacked north to south, because of the prevailing winds in this area are from the south-southwest, and you would stack it and leave a 1.5-inch gap between the boards, and then you would stick it. You would cut 1/2-inch, 3/4-inch boards of the same species, and put those every 16 inches, and then put another stack of lumber
on top of it.
And then when you're done, you would cover it with tin just on the top, and so the air would come through it, on all 4 sides. And go ahead.
Y'all continue, because I was going to bring up an East Coast boat building
kind
of thing.
And the rule of thumb was always a year per inch to get the green lumber down to an acceptable percentage, which is around 10, 11%, 12% for boat building. So the 8/4 would have to be air dried for 2 years, and the 5/4 for 1 year, a little over 1 year.
So, 2 questions. One, did you ever come in with a moisture meter and actually, verify that you were at the percentage that you wanted?
Yeah, I mean you can, but it's just it foregone.
You just went by the rule of thumb.
Rule of thumb, because it's going to take moisture back in again. Now, but you start getting a cabinet, and when it has to be kiln dried, then you got to get it down to 7%, and then you want to test it. Make sure that.
So actually today I was in one of my old manuals. It's called Planking and Fastening. It was an East Coast boat builders manual. You probably know some of the people in there. I should bring it in. And interestingly enough, there was a process they had for drying, but they put the planks up in a rack, so they were all like teepeed basically in a rack, and you'd build this rack to dry them versus laying them out and stacking it.
I don't know. Green lumber. You want to make sure it's straight, stacked, level, and I can't imagine what a board would do if you stacked them around like a teepee. They look like a stack up.
No, it was like like when you put your skis. You ever been like skiing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know how like the ski rack and the skis kind of stick up like this. Yeah, there's a.
Interesting.
I'll bring it in. I'll bring it in for your read. Actually, I'll show you after the show.
Well, my dinghies.
Well, there you go.
There you have it.
So where are we at now? 13 footers.
Well,
let's talk about some 13 footers.
Well, we're going to start with what the smallest cats on the block coming out of the war.
Well, the one was pre-war, right?
Well, the leader.
The leader is pre-war.
Yeah. No, the ideal.
The ideal, that's correct.
Yeah, the ideal was a pre-war model.
Yeah, the ideal, the leader, and then the 13
correct.
Foots.
Yeah, there were three basic 13-foot models post-war. First one being the 13-foot ideal, second one being the 13-foot leader, and the second being the 13-foot runabout, which probably was the most popular. But the ideal was a pre-war model, and they took the 1948 model, and after the war, they came back and reintroduced it, and it was the pre-war look with the exposed rear keel, and the transom just cut out for a small outboard.
I think they had like a 25 on those.
Oh, probably not that big. Well, boy, that'd be the limit. Most of them had 5-10 horse. Yeah, and they were tiller. There was no steering. You just hand tilled it, and they were inexpensive. Yeah, motor up to. They were originally designed to use up to a 3.5. But I know they put bigger motors on them, but I don't think he'd want to go much more than 5 or 10 on one of those.
Unless you're racing it.
Yeah.
That's a different boat. So you had the ideal.
Correct.
Right, and then you had the leader.
Yeah, and these boats were $220 in 1948. And the last year of production in 1956, they were listed for $275. So that's relatively inexpensive.
There's something someone could get into. And then they had two basic fishing boats too. They had the runabout, the angler, and the fisherman, correct?
Well, now you're getting into the 13-foot runabout. We've still got to go to
the leader.
The leader.
Well, let's talk about the leader,
which took the place of the ideal.
So the leader replaced the ideal. The ideal was more of a pre-war production, and then post-war.
Yeah.
We got the leader.
Yeah, and they just what did we say? Discontinued that 56, I believe. So now you've got the leader. Pretty much another inexpensive outboard tiller steer. No frills, pair of oars. It was a little better suited for the outboard. And yeah, they dropped the Ideal in '56, and then they brought up the Leader. You know, it was still in 1960 when they dropped it. It was still under $400. That's that's pretty cheap, even by 1950 standards, I would think.
I mean, how much was a hamburger? A nickel?
The what?
A hamburger. It was like a nickel.
Oh, I don't know.
You don't remember getting
Well,
nickel
I
hamburgers?
can't remember. I can't remember back then.
You never got a nickel hamburger?
I don't know about a nickel hamburger.
Grandma used to tell me about nickel hamburgers.
Yeah, grandmother. Now you're calling me your grandfather.
No, I'm just saying. Well, my grandmother, who's significantly older than you, you know.
But yeah, they were. You know, these two models were inexpensive. Basically, a rowing model that you could put an outboard on. Just an upscale livery model of the pre-war. You know, it wasn't until they got into the actual outboard runabouts where the beam started to widen and you know, they took on the characteristics of the inboard, you know, to where you could, you know, put some power on them, and they got steering wheels and throttle controls.
Yeah, they're cable steering, correct?
Oh yeah,
All cable steering.
all cable steering.
And I think so. So let's go on that one. So let's go on the runabout. So the runabout was the next one. You had the two models: the runabout, the angler, and the fisherman. They're all kind of, I guess, one model, but you can get in different type of packages, if you will, or fit and finishes depending on what you
Well-
wanted to do with it.
Yeah, I've got to. Guys, who wrote this book? No, whose car alarm keeps going on?
It's the two times.
I know.
Apparently, they don't know how to unlock the door before they open it.
Right, but the runabouts were, you know, originally designed with the center steer, and you know, the center deck, center steer, and they built it in three configurations. It was the runabout, the angler, and then they came along with the fisherman. Now the runabout was just a single seat, center deck, center steer, and then they instituted a angler model, which would put two rear-facing seats behind that helm station, because, you know, everything was built around fishing. And back in the old days, it was trolling. So it's truck to troll when you're facing forward. You know, if you're facing back and you've got a pole over the side, it's, you know, it's much easier. And then they came along with the fisherman, where they just eliminated everything, where you didn't have to step over that center deck.
To get you back.
Yeah, it was
Made
a
an
little-
open
wide,
platform.
you know, a little more wide open, but you know, still, it's a small boat. I mean, you know, they're 13 foot. They're, you know, 23-inch freeboard. You know, the transom's only 52 inches wide. The boat, they only weighed 250, 260. So they're small boats.
You could almost throw that one in the back of your truck.
Pit in there. And, you know, they were only, you know, rated up to 25 horse. Now, we've had one, we had Ryan's. He's got a 1948 that we bought, and it had a 35 horse Evinrude on it. And the first thing we did was drop that thing in the water. And I don't know if he might have been 12, maybe 13, and sent him out in East Harbor with that 35 horse Evinrude on the back of that 13 footer, and he was flying.
Just skipping across the water.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Full planing hull.
Yep. But, and I don't know how many of these they built, just thousands of these 13 footers in those three configurations. I don't know if the numbers are listed, Well, they are in chapter 7, but
When we look at the VINs, correct?
right.
Or HINs, or I don't know what they call them, the serial numbers
Yeah,
or identification.
and like all the outboards, they didn't come. They left the factory. No hardware. Windshields were optional, and they weren't even optional on 13. They were optional on the 15. Now I have built some windshields for 13s, and I believe Armstrong Galbraith, they sold so many Lymans. They were such a big dealership out of New York that they had their own catalog of Lyman options, and they offered a windshield that they built, which was called an Arga, ARGA, and you can always tell one of those windshields. Or I can, or most people can. They don't look exactly like a Lyman windshield, but it was the one offered by Armstrong Galbraith as an option for those boats, and I've always considered them that's a Lyman windshield. Just wasn't built by Lyman, but it was built by a dealership so big that they built their own accessories.
That's interesting. They had basically you got your Lyman boat, and then you could have they had a catalog of parts that they were actually peddling and
Correct.
constructing.
Yeah.
To
That's
outfit.
how big that dealership was.
And building it on the side, they had people doing this.
Yeah. And Taylor windshields. The plastic windshields you see on some of those Lymans, that was offered by Taylor. I've got catalogs in the archives. Taylor. This is a Taylor windshield made for a 13, 15-foot Lyman outboard.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's how popular the boats were, and they were sent out bare bones. Again, I think we honed in on this
With the hardware.
with the hardware. The hardware, it was standard of the decade or whatever era they were built in, because the boats would go to the West Coast, they'd go to the East Coast, they'd go to Texas, Florida, and whatever the dealership was selling as far as hardware and or motors is how the boat would be outfitted. If it was a Johnson dealer, that boat was getting a Johnson motor put on it. If it was a Evinrude dealer, it was getting an Evinrude. Now, if they had an inn with Perco, Wilcox Crittenden, excuse me, Atwood, that's the hardware they would use. Whatever the dealership was selling at the time, and whatever they were buying, wholesale. So that's how it's and you go to a boat show, and I don't want to pick on judges at boat shows, but 99.9% of the time, they don't know shit from Shinola when it comes to a Lyman boat, because they don't understand how they were constructed right after the war, and they don't understand how they were outfitted after the war. So somebody shows up with a 1952 outboard, this original hardware, and it's got all the dimples in the hull, and a semi-gloss paint job on it, or a satin, whatever you want to call it, 3106 pennant, and the judge says, well, your hull's not faired out, we're knocking points off. Well, this hardware's not right, we're knocking points off. They got no idea. No idea.
Well, maybe the Lyman boat wasn't made to win shows. It was just made to win the water.
There's a lot of these guys. They have done a lot of research, and they restore these boats to near perfection how they were from the plant, and they go to a boat show and get knocked off points. The same thing happened with the race boat. I took the race boat up there after.
The one in the trailer.
Oh yeah, guy goes, the hull's all dimpled. I go, yeah. They didn't fill in the dimples in 1930. Oh, You sure? No. I wrote the book on it, but I'm not sure. You know. So, anyhow, let's get off that. But anyhow, it wasn't until the mid 50s that Lyman really started to ferret out the hulls. And, the hardware, as far as the outboards, never did appear. The inboards. Now you can start to standardize the hardware that you use on the inboards, and we'll get into that when we get into the inboard models.
Yeah, let's stick with the outboard. So
Let's stick with the outboard.
after the 13, you had the 16.5-foot outboard, right? That was...
No, we had a 15.
Was there a 15?
Oh, the 15, yeah. That's that's the most produced.
Was that... I thought it's 15, or is it the 16.5?
No, 15. The 15-foot runabout was the most produced outboard that Lyman ever built. And that's the one that they reached the peak in 1955, I believe, that they sold over, they made over, oh boy, was it 5,000 of them? Oh, if my memory serves me correct, they built, no, they built 5,000 boats that year. And the majority of those were
The 15.
the 15s and the 13s. But they built, I forget, it's in the hall records. The 15-foot was the most produced outboard. The 18-foot Islander inboard was the most produced inboard. And, both those boats put Lyman on the map post-war.
So was the 16.5 just a redo of the 15, adding a foot and a half?
No, it was deeper. It had more depth, more plank. It was wider. They're just trying to keep up with the marketing, and some of the things are interesting. When they hit 1960 and the hull design changed, well, they're in competition with Thompson, Pinyan, Chris Craft didn't build outboards, but they're in competition. A lot of the styling things. I remember one of the most notable things I noted in 1961 from the brochures. They list their 16-foot deluxe model with a vinyl deck and aluminum windshield. Now that's all marketing, and that's all styling change coming into the 60s with all that.
We haven't even got there yet.
I know.
We're not even there.
I know. We're still
putting the cart in front of the horse right
We've
now.
gone from the 15 to 16 and a half, but see, from there, then they jump to the 17. You're still building the 18, and that's what I'm saying. By 1960, they're building a 13, a 15, 16 and a half, 17, an 18
Which is
foot outboard.
And the 18 was an interesting boat because the 18 could accommodate either a 90 horse or two twin 40s. Correct.
Yeah.
And that was a very popular boat out here for recreational, on the lake, because you could put 240s on there, and outboards weren't as reliable.
And that was
back in 56, 57 as they are today. So if you lost one, you always had one to get home on.
And that was the same hull that they used for the 18
And you could trailer it.
Yeah.
So people didn't have to have a dock space. They could trailer it around and
it's a big outboard
and move it.
Same hull that they built the 18-foot inboard.
Same hull as the inboard.
Yep.
Do we want to go to the inboard now? Because that's the next big.
Well, you want to go through the 16 and a half and the.
We got the 16 and a half, the 17, and then you had the 18.
Yeah, and I stayed here. They're trying to fill every niche in the outboard market. They're trying to keep up with the Joneses. They're trying to stay ahead of the curve. But like I said, the 16 and a half was a little deeper. And then they went to the 17 foot in 1959. They only built that boat for 2 years. But
Yeah,
that's
59 to
probably
60.
the best outboard they ever built. It was deep enough, a little bit longer, had a rear seat, and that's one of the most desirable outboard models to find because they only built it for 2 years, and it's probably the best outboard model they built. It's kind of an accumulation of all their research and
So why'd they only keep it around for 2 years then?
because in '60 they completely revamped the styling and the hull design overnight.
Oh, we'll get to that. Once again, we're getting ahead. So you have the 17, the 18, but you're saying the 17 is still one of the more desirable outboards to find.
Yeah, I
So if you find one in a barn somewhere, that's the one.
17 foot.
That's the one.
I've
you'll
never
find.
heard anything bad about the 17. The 18, you got to know what you're doing with it. It's got to be propped right. The motor's got to be set up right. They tend to get a little squirrely. I don't know if it's the design. Or
Describe squirrely. Like you're up on play and they start to
Yeah,
walk.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you got to drive it a
It's
little.
squirrely. Kind of like the neighbor behind us, old squirrel.
Yeah. Well, they're out
Yeah,
having a hoot and holler.
yeah. But I mean, well, you can look at the 17 in the book. You can tell how much deeper it is, and, with that rear seat. And of course, by this time, they've all got to have self-bailing wells in them. The day of the naked outboard is gone with the new regulations. So, but I mean, 16 and a half, 17 foot, both nice boats, and a 15 foot.
So do you have any of those in your collection?
I don't. No, I don't have a 17. Got 13. We got a 15. We got 16 and a half. Don't have an 18 foot outboard, but those are readily available to see. It's the pre-wars that are tough to find if you're
gonna look for one.
Well, if you're gonna have one from every decade.
The pre-war is yeah. I mean it's 40.
But
So let's get into the next big boat off the line, which would be you want to go into the Islander. That's the next one in the queue.
that's the boat to put Lyman on the map.
The 18-foot
Islander. That is the first boat that Lyman named the Islander.
No, wasn't there a pre-war one?
That was the Islander, yeah. 17 Islander.
There's 17
yeah,
Islander.
That was the precursor to
the
the
precursor. And then
Right,
there was,
right,
yeah. So
right,
the
right.
18 was the second Islander.
18. Well, call it what you may. But anyhow, they went from that 17 foot utility. You remember we
talked about this.
We talked about that.
Yep.
And then they developed that 17 foot Islander right before the war.
Correct.
Right. Then they came out after the war with the updated version, which was, plywood construction instead of the solid mahogany. That would be the 18 foot Islander, and that's the one that would put Lyman on the map. And they built, what did I say, over 2,600.
2,600 between 47 and
46 and 19.
Well, they came out like December of 46 for the 47. 47 to 60 model years.
Right, to the end of the old style hull construction at the end of 1959. So that was the most produced inboard, and that boat.
I mean, it came with like two configurations, right? It had like the Gray Marine 620, or
well, no, the first one's only had a 25 horse.
Yeah, that was the Gray Marine.
Sea Scout.
Was it?
Yeah,
Was it the Sea
25
Scout?
horse Sea Scout.
That was a Gray Marine, though, right?
Oh yeah.
That was 25 horse, and they come up with a 60 for it.
I'm going to bring up a great Islander story, and some of my friends out there are going to remember this. And we went to a boat show at Port Huron, and I think it was Greg Group, myself, and Ryan, who was always with me, and I think I was judging up at Port Huron, and Big Bob Jensen was bringing his 18-foot Islander up from St. Clair to Port Huron. Well, it was an early model. I think it had a 40. It might even have a 620. Regardless, Big Bob was named Big Bob for a reason. And he had a brother. And he was by no means any smaller than Big Bob. Well, anybody that's been in the St. Clair River going up Port Huron, it's about a 10-mile current coming this way. And these two guys are trying to get to Port Huron and this 18-foot Islander with a 40 horsepower inboard. And it took them all day to motor up. And it can't be, 15 miles? But they were fighting that current. And they pulled in, and oh my God, we laughed about that. We laughed about that for weeks. Trying to get that little Islander up that current with them two big guys in that boat. Then they stayed on it. Now, those were the days. That's when men were men.
And boats were boats.
And boats were boats.
So, all right. So let's get back to this Islander. Now that we got the we got the Bobs out of the way. We got the Bob story out of the way.
Yeah, that was a good story.
It's a good story.
Yeah, they started.
Maybe they needed the 620 on there.
I think they might have had. They could have had a V8 in that thing. I don't think it
would have made a difference.
It would have made much difference. Anyhow, they went from a 25 to a 40. I think the biggest one.
Well, 60 was the biggest, wasn't it?
Yeah, biggest one they ever put in it. Yeah.
Yeah, 60.
And it was built strictly for trolling for walleye back in the 50s and 60s. And that was the reason that, it's always called the Lyman Islander side steer. And the reason the side steer is so you could sit at the side of the boat with your pole because you're trolling.
And you had a stick steer, right? Was it a stick steer side steer? Or was it a wheel on the side?
Two wheels. A wheel forward and a wheel aft. You could steer from the back seat, steer from the front seat. The stick was the shifter.
Okay.
The throttle control was on the side of the engine bar.
So you had double helms, basically.
Correct.
Double helms, so you could troll out the back and run out the front.
Yeah, and the first ones had the fuel tank forward up under the front deck, and the fuel tube was right out of the front deck. And then in 55, 56, they revamped it, and actually it was built on the same platform as the 18 runabout, soon to become the 19-foot runabout. But the first Islanders were very flat bottom, round chine, and they had a wood skeg, and like I said, the fuel tank forward, and then they redesigned that hull when they introduced that 18-foot inboard runabout. So the 18-foot inboard runabout and the 18-foot Islander were basically the same hull after 50, I believe 55, 56. Yeah, the 18-foot inboard runabout in this model, yeah. So, and there's a great, if anybody's got the book in front of that shot on page 92 of that boat taken at the Miami Boat Show with the trolling, with the fighting chairs.
Oh yeah.
That's bad. That's badass.
That's pretty cool.
That is.
Because you got to remember, like, they were using these boats not only on Lake Erie, they were using these boats
These boats
in
were
Florida. They were fishing offshore. They were using these boats
saltwater,
all over the place to fish out.
saltwater fastened is how they always advertised because the bronze fastening. There was no steel in them.
Yeah, I think sometimes, we kind of get, like, pigeonholed because we think, like, Sandusky, Lyman Boats, Lake Erie. But at this point, these boats were everywhere. Like, the biggest dealership was in New York.
They had a dealership in every state of the union at one time. And I remember going through the records. There was a dealership in Puerto Rico.
So they were even going overseas.
Yeah, overseas, maybe not to a dealership, but I've got a list of the dealerships somewhere in the archives, and there's a dealership in virtually every state of the union. And like I said, I did see that one dealership in Puerto Rico.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean they were big for a small company. The boat touched a lot of people in a lot of different areas of the country. And
So-
there are
Here's an off-topic question. Do you ever find boats coming from some of these out-of-the-way places, like a boat that's been in Florida or up in,
oh yeah,
the
sure.
Finger Lakes area or something like that?
Oh, Finger Lakes, they're all over up there.
Aren't there a couple up on Coeur d'Alene? Didn't Pat Dietrich
Oh,
take
yeah.
a board out to like Coeur d'Alene
There's
last
a bunch
year or
of them
something
out
like
Coeur
that?
d'Alene. There's a bunch of them out in Seattle. Seattle's got their own little group out there.
Really?
Oh yeah, in the was it Puget Sound out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've sent I don't know 2 or 3 out there. I've sent a couple over to Europe.
Huh.
Yeah.
So they're all around.
Actually, Groby's old 30, or my old 30, went out to is it Idaho or Utah? Idaho. Yeah, and it just came back here a couple months ago. So that 30-footer went out there and came back. And it's back here in Lake Erie. 30-foot sportsman.
Wow. So it's taken a 6,000-mile round trip
It's come home.
to come home.
Come home. So,
So there's some other also about the Islander. Let's get back to the Islander. So, did they offer? I thought I read this. I didn't put it in my notes, but you could order auxiliary fuel tank with them too. Was that? Or am I confusing that one with the 18-foot outboard, or you could get an auxiliary fuel tank?
probably the outboard.
Probably the outboard.
Yeah, because the Islander, like I said, it wasn't to 1955-56 when the newer style hull. They put the tank in the back behind the seat, which is predominant in all the Lyman inboards, post-war. But the early ones had the fuel tank with rectangular forward under the front deck. But the auxiliary fuel tank would have been that 18-foot outboard.
Was the out? Yeah.
And I, if I remember correctly, they were under the front seat, which helped. Especially if you got twin outboards on the back, and that fuel on the front seat would help balance the boat out. Correct.
So you had the 18-foot. Well, so let's go through. We had the 17-foot Islander, which then became the 18-foot Islander.
18-foot Islander.
And then there was really only 2 more Islanders that they produced, right? I believe it was the 29 Islander
Well,
and a 30 Islander.
Well, a same boat. 29.6. They're the same boat. It's just
It was just marketing.
marketing. Yeah.
Same hull.
Yeah.
So in
Those
theory,
are
you
the
have
only 2 Islanders ever produced.
3 Islanders.
2. But I'm considering the 29.6 and the 30 the same boat.
29.6, but you're considering the 17 and the 18 the same boat.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, same
it
boat.
could be 4 boats, but it was just 2 boats.
Right.
And then so when we talk about the,
everybody
calls it an Islander, but really no, there was really only 2 Islanders.
Well, Islander is synonymous with Lyman, just because of the 18-foot. Everybody says, "Well, I have this 25-foot Lyman Islander." No, you don't. You got 25-foot Lyman runabout. The Islander's either 18-foot or the bigger twin, 30-foot or 29.6. So,
And that's the Islander
correct.
until we get to the bigger one. Those were after 60, correct?
What?
The
Yeah.
29 and the 30.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a new style hull. You have your old style hull, the tumble home. Then you have your new style hull, which we're going to get into next week, which is basically the same boat from the waterline under, but redesigned from the waterline up. So,
Fair enough. So you want to move on from the Islander?
well, I don't know.
Why, do you have more to divulge on the Islander?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, what do we want to talk about? Again, boat came, windshields optional.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the fitment. So you could order these hard top, no top,
I don't know if you can order the hard top. I mean,
soft
probably
top.
probably on a special order. But the boats came without windshields. That was an option in all these boats. You check it out. You want a windshield? Bam. You want a windshield later? Bam. They'll ship it out to you in a box. Fit right on top. Or, like we talked about, Armstrong Galbraith. They had their own line of
Accessories you could put in, like
yeah.
perhaps the fighting chairs.
Well, yeah, now that.
That
sure
just looks really cool.
it is. I mean, look at the size of those poles.
Those are the outriggers for trolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine catching a shark on that.
You need a bigger boat.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a couple of great shots on in the book of the Islander. We never talked about that 22-footer.
The 22-foot inboard runabout.
Yeah, that was one.
That's the one after the Islander.
Well, that's one. This boat was this is a pre-war boat, and some of these were pre-cut. They got everything ready to go, and then the war comes along, and so
They only made like 45 of that one, right?
Yeah,
and they had it was leftover parts.
correct leftover stuff from World War II.
It wasn't that boat was not plywood.
No, and look how narrow the planks are. Solid mahogany, heavy boat, very heavy boat. 5/8 thick, solid mahogany planks, probably no more than 3.5, 4 inches wide, and heavy boat and just beautiful lines. I mean, that picture on page 93, that those boats were gorgeous.
Have you seen one of those?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Bill
So 45. How many
Bill
you think are
Jocker's
left?
got one of these, and I think King Chrysler's got one. He's restoring.
So they're still around.
Oh yeah, and this is along the same lines as the we talked about the X Model 19.
Yeah, that's the.
The Indian.
Everyone's got to have an X model.
Yeah.
What they made like 15 of those or something.
Not many.
I don't remember how many you said they made, but I just remember that.
This is leftover stuff.
I just remember that Commander McDonald had one.
Yeah.
One of his many boats. He must have had a very large garage.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure. You figure if the big Mizpah was 185 foot.
Yeah.
That's a big boat. But yeah, by the early 50s, they've depleted the pre-war
Materials and their inventories
inventory, whatever they had pre-cut, whatever they were going to design, or this blah 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 blah, and now we're into by the mid 50s we're stuck 13, 15, 16 and a half, 17, 18 foot outboard, 18 inboard, 19 inboard, 23 inboard, which we will get into.
We might have to save that one. That's kind of like.
Well, we're going to go to the inboards, I think, next weekend. Or next week.
Well, they start here after the X model. I mean, you got the 18, 25, 19, 23, and that takes us to 1960.
Yeah. But,
well,
yeah,
I think you got to save the 23 because that's.
Well, we probably want to save the inboards for next weekend.
Sure.
For next week. Are we doing it Thursday or Friday?
I'm going to be in Cleveland on Thursday, but I will be back here on Friday. I'm all week in Cleveland. So we can do Friday.
Right.
Friday night. So 2 Fridays.
All right. 2 Fridays back to back.
Yeah, Fridays back to back. So next week's Friday again. The 5th. We'll do it on Coast Guard Day.
The 4th.
The 4th. We'll do it on Coast Guard Day.
That's
Yeah.
Coast Guard Day?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll
Okay, God bless
broadcast
the Coast Guard.
on Coast Guard Day.
All right. I don't know.
The oldest seagoing service in America.
Yes, sir.
Continuous. The Navy likes to say they're older, but they got disbanded and put back together.
There you have it. Now, Andy, somewhat of a historian on this. Now, Andy, why don't you just tell us how the Coast Guard started? It was
The Revenue Cutter Service.
exactly.
And
What was the first boat?
Oh, shoot.
The Bear.
The Bear.
The original Bear.
The original Bear.
Right. Not the 901.
Not the 901. The original Bear.
Yeah.
So here's another interesting fact, though, about the Coast Guard versus the Navy. The Navy budget for coatings, a.k.a. paint, is more than the entire Coast Guard's budget for everything. They spend more on paint than the Coast Guard spends on everything.
And there you have it, folks.
That's a lot of paint. Well,
Okay.
that's puts it in scale.
And Andy, did you know that the New York City Police Department,
It's about the same size as the Coast Guard Active Duty.
larger
Yeah.
than the Coast Guard?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep, because I think Coast Guard is right under 45,000,
Yeah, we're something. I think 42 right now.
42,000. Just a little trivia for you out there tonight.
Here's another trivia. Here's another one. Just so let's talk about how big the DoD is. This is very interesting. So, the Coast Guard, we used to pay out from our own budget all our retirees. That was a big part of our budget. We had to pay out, annual incomes for retirement. The Department of Defense has a giant pot of money that they pay everyone out. They just absorbed all of us, and it was like, no, we're good. We don't even need anything from you. It was like a blink.
Yeah.
So
Hey, Andy, before I forget, we got any questions? We have to have questions this week.
we had Christopher Bunzy's evening, and we have Squirrel.
Really?
Squirrel says hi from the Outer Banks. I can't believe they even have reception out there on the Outer Banks.
Well, what did Chris ask a question?
Oh, he just said evening, Doc.
Chris Bunzy. Hey, a shout out to Chris. He has put on this cruise in at Marblehead Estates for the last 2 years over here on Bayshore, the other side of Marblehead. And the third annual is coming up next June, about the same weekend. And Chris is instrumental in starting that up with the help of Courtney and all the people at Marblehead Estates to bring a Lyman cruise in over. And next year it's going to be bigger and better. Chris Hammond will be doing his live demonstration. Now that we figured out we can have a screen, I'm going to be doing 2 of the PowerPoints on the history and the PowerPoint on the tooling, which Pat Dietrich will be helping me with. And
Maybe we can have a live show with all these people at the table.
we could, yeah.
There you go.
But anyhow, Chris, thanks for listening in tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Squirrel, I'll see you next week. We got shit going here. We got a canvas down.
Stuff going.
Yeah, we got stuff going. We got a new panel made. We're either going to find the old one in the morning, or we're going to make the new one.
I think you're making the new one.
Yeah, you never know.
I think
we might get lucky.
that ship sailed.
No. And one other thing, I forgot what I was going to say about the show next week. It's next Friday. Next Friday, Coast Guard Day.
Coast Guard Day show.
And thanks to all our veterans. And
Day after the veterans on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. We mentioned August 3rd for the veterans to come to Tibbles for the fish fry. My uncle will be here, one of the last remaining World War II veterans. They're getting few between. And we're going to pick up where we left off with the inboards, the post-war inboards, and that'll start with the 18-foot inboard runabout, graduating to the 19 and the 23-foot.
I think the 23 foot's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Interesting.
There's history behind that one.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Well, thank you, folks, for joining us tonight. Please
Absolutely.
like us, follow us, send us an email, chat.
Yeah.
And now we gotta spend our $75. Our routine after the show.
Well, I don't know if we have quite that much left. I don't know what
Well, that's
happened.
because you spent it.
I don't know. But
Cough it up, buddy.
anyhow, we're gonna see if Danny can find that canvas in the morning. We've got 2 more spots to look.
We'll all be out there snagging.
Yeah, snagging.
Weather permitting, we'll have some better electronics out looking too.
It's called Find the Canvas. Hey, folks, had a good time tonight. We'll see you next Friday night. Andy, thanks, man.
We'll see ya.